Back with Jeffrey Smith, and let's go right ahead. Good news, and then at least you want people to contact Strickland's office?
Yes, I'm going to put that in the film and on our website. It's the first time we're actually going national with this because it is such a national issue.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, very good. All right.
Now, some more information here. We've seen a lot of trade disruption on GMOs of late. Flax, which is not legal, genetically modified flax, not legally grown in Canada, was found to have contaminated the Canadian flax supplies and Europe.
Where did the contaminated flax originate from?
Well, at one point, a pro-GM flax farmer was handing out bags for free to try and promote them years ago, but it hadn't been legal since 2001. But it was found, and it has shut down flax exports through Europe. Soybeans shipped to Europe were found contaminated with unapproved varieties of corn. Corn varieties approved in the United States, but not yet approved in Europe. And so,
in soy?
In soybeans, yeah, because they ship them in the same containers, and so you know it's typical. Even in wheat, you can find traces of genetically modified soy and corn. But they actually found in soybeans shipped to Europe the unapproved corn varieties, and so they stopped importing soy from the United States. And South Africa's winemakers are trying to say don't introduce genetically modified grapes. Thousands of farmers in Pakistan took to the streets to protest the approval of genetically modified BT cotton there. Thousands of citizens in Germany took to the streets. And in the background of another thing, I actually told the Australian government leaders and the public, I said, you should definitely not allow genetically modified canola because Japan is one of your biggest export markets. And right now they don't label canola oil as genetically engineered because they have a loophole because they don't label the oil. But if that changes, and things will get tighter, consumers are winning the battle and they are getting tighter in the labeling laws, this will happen and Japan will start to label the oil that's genetically engineered, and it's now going to happen, which means that the Australian states, which lifted the moratorium a couple of years ago, are going to be in real bad shape because they won't be able to send their genetically modified canola anymore, and they've already contaminated their land with the GM canola. So it's a big I told you so.
That's permanent, isn't it? That's permanent contamination, isn't it?
Yes, basically. I mean, there's going to be some level. Even if you took a one little field of canola and you planted GM canola 1 year, and then you planted non-GM canola in all the remaining years after that, there's what's called volunteers, where the unharvested seeds will grow, and some will grow the next year, and some will actually not be germinating for several years. And then about 10% of the canola gets dropped into the field and doesn't get actually harvested. So after 16 years, you still have contamination of over 1% when you've planted non-GM canola for the last 15 years.
Over 1%. Okay, now you said something earlier about GMO grapes. Who else is trying to sneak or otherwise introduce GMO crops and fruits and vegetables into the economy? We always think of Monsanto, but who are some of these other companies?
Well, the four other ones that are active that already have GM crops on the market are DuPont, Dow, Bayer, and Syngenta. But BASF is also trying to commercialize their first GM crop.
Did they make tape recordings?
I think so. But, you get these nexus of the chemical producers, the people that the organizations that produce the agricultural chemicals. In fact, the GM food makers produce 60% of the agricultural chemicals. And of course, they package the herbicides with the herbicide-tolerant crops. Most GM crops, about 80%, are designed, or 85% actually, are designed not to die when sprayed with herbicides. So they sell it as a package deal. And this is the main reason they genetically engineer crops, so that they can sell their herbicides. And most people think, oh, to save the world, but it's all pushing the chemicals. Now, we talked about the trade disruption in Japan, in Australia, in Canada, in the U.S. soybeans, in the winemakers in Germany and Pakistan. On top of all of that, the wheat growers organizations in the United States are trying to open the doors for genetically modified wheat.
Huh.
It is like the most ridiculous thing. Years ago, before Monsanto pulled the plug on its wheat variety, a economist in Iowa did a study and said that we would lose 30 to 50% of our export market, and the price of wheat would drop by about a third if genetically modified wheat were introduced, because the world does not want it.
Right.
The Canadian Wheat Board, which markets 100% of all the wheat out of Canada to other countries, they calculated they'd lose 87%
wow.
of their export market.
They're finished.
And so somehow Monsanto and the biotech industry can get in there and create fear, saying you're falling behind, that all of these great new drought tolerance and heat tolerance.
You're obsolete, you're outdated.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, the GM crops reduce average yield. They actually fail often. They don't give the agricultural benefits.
That's been proven time and time again,
incredibly.
ladies and gentlemen.
And yet they have figured out how to convince these poor wheat farmers, because they may be suffering from something completely unrelated, and then they bring in the magic bullet, GMOs will save the day. And it's just absolutely, I mean, I would love to speak to the wheat industry and set them straight with some of the facts, and I hope to.
Have you contacted them?
I'm planning to very soon. I was actually started that process just before Monsanto canceled its wheat, but now I have to sort of rev up again. Frankly, I'll tell you the truth, Jeff, my focus is on ending the genetic engineering of food supply, and I don't want to be distracted from containing its expansion.
They'll have you going after brush fire after brush fire, and chasing your tail forever.
Exactly. I have a very clear, very specific plan to end the genetic engineering of the food supply by educating enough consumers, say 5% of U.S. shoppers, to avoid eating GMOs, and that would be sufficient to create the tipping point. So our shopping guide is key. Information about health risks are key. I really don't want to be distracted from that.
Nor shall you be. 5%, folks, that's the tipping point. That's all. 5 out of 100 shoppers, if they said no to GMO, we could whip it. And Jeffrey Smith would be the man who gets the credit. He's led the fight from the beginning. Extraordinary achievements, what one person is still capable of, even in this dumbed down and crushed environment when it comes to free expression on the so-called MSM, mainstream media. You can do it if you want to. Back in a minute.